Welcome to Roadmap to Retirement. Tune in for financial tips, investment strategies, and smart money moves to supercharge your retirement savings. Alex Neri, CFP, and guests are here to help you build your roadmap to retirement.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Roadmap to Retirement podcast. Today I'm joined by Ryan Andrew. Ryan, tell the people what you do.
Hi people, I am Ryan Andrew with AP Professionals of Rochester. I am a placement director. So AP Professionals, if you don't know, is a boutique staffing agency here in Rochester. This is the community that we focus on.
Okay, very good. What got you into doing that type of business? I know you went to school for accounting originally.
Yes.
So why the shift and how long have you been doing it?
Yeah, so I'm an accountant by education, by trade. I actually connected with AP Professionals as a candidate, hoping to find a new accounting job. I wasn't trying to get out of accounting, but someone I went to school with and had known was a recruiter at AP Professionals and kind of opened my eyes to an opportunity internally. And after some conversations over a couple months, I took a risk and accepted the offer to come on board as a recruiter. I've been doing it for almost 5 years now.
Wow, 5 years in, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Cool. So a lot of people might wonder why we chose to bring someone like yourself on the podcast. This is a financial planning podcast. And I think the way that we connected back is a lot of times when we're meeting with clients, we find that they're kind of at this point where they're making good money, but they can't quite afford to do either everything we recommend they do, or they can't quite reach their financial goals just because they don't have the income. So I think a good jumping off point for us is what are some things that people can do to either negotiate a better salary where they're working, or if they're in a position where they're looking for a new employer, how can they negotiate to get to a point where they are earning that income that they need?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's a hot topic right now, right? With the cost of everything going up, right? It's how can I increase my compensation? Fortunately, I think that is becoming easier, which I'd say is a good thing, especially with the salary transparency laws. A lot of people now in New York are going to know what a company has budgeted, but it's still, the art in it is how you ask, how you approach it, right? Like if you come into a salary negotiation saying, if it's not X, I'm out the door. I mean, that's the wrong way to go about it, obviously. It's going to sound cliche, but having done your research and coming prepared to express what value you can bring to the team is what it's really about. So, to give an example, it could be along the lines of, hey company, thank you so much for the offer. I'm actively interviewing for roles in the X range. My market research has shown that's what my skill set is worth. And, I'd really like to be at that top of the range. What skills are you looking for to pay someone at the top of the range? And kind of turn the table around on the employer and ask, well, what does someone need to bring to the table to make that top of the range? Because again, we all know interviewing is a two-way street, and I'm a big advocate of kind of flipping the script and making them answer some questions.
That's an interesting way to phrase it, to kind of flip the script like you said, but is that advantageous as a candidate in the interview process to bring it up proactively to say, what is the salary of this position? Or is it better to wait until the employer kind of speaks first and names a price range?
So it's funny, as a recruiter, I have two thoughts about it, because obviously when I'm working with candidates, part of the process that a recruiter does is we mention the candidate's salary expectations from the get-go, right, when their resume is submitted before even the first interview. So that can help in the process too, right, so expectations are clear. But if you're pursuing a role on your own, I absolutely think it's okay to talk about it in a first interview. I mean, it's probably not going to be the first thing you talk about. You're going to want to focus on what's required of the role and the skill set that you can bring, the value you can add to the team. But, I'm a big advocate of being direct, and I think at the end of that first interview, you can have an honest conversation, about what they have budgeted for the range and what you're looking for. I mean, at the end of the day, an interview, it is a two-way street, right? It's, you have skills, a company is offering to pay salary and benefits for those skills, and you're really just having a conversation to see if it is a good business arrangement, right, if it makes sense. So personally, I think it's completely fine to bring that up on the first interview.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I'm fortunate to be in a position where I haven't had to interview much of my life. I'm fortunate to do this. I get to work for myself, and I guess I haven't seen it from that end. For somebody that has maybe identified that it's time to change careers, they know what they want to do, and maybe they picked out a job that they really want, what are some things they can do to stand out amongst a field of other applicants that probably have a similar resume? When you really break it down, how do they get their foot in the door?
Yeah, that's a great point, and we all know jobs are competitive. I mean, if you can go on on LinkedIn and see a job that's posted, and it can say, there's 50 applicants in the first couple hours, right? So like, how do you, a few of the more basic things would be, honestly, how your resume is constructed. I mean, you could have a great skill set and bring great value to a team, but if it's not showcased the right way on that piece of paper, which is kind of an unfortunate truth, that can put you into a yes or no pile right off the bat. But I'd say one of the easiest ways to stand out is really just leveraging a network. And that is really important, especially in a small town like Rochester. And again, that's my expertise and my experience is our community. I'm not sure how things work out in a larger city like a Boston or New York, but here in Rochester, I mean, if you can take the time to do some research and find out, who the hiring manager is, maybe some people you'd be working with on the team, and go to LinkedIn and send a message and try to connect organically with other players. I've seen it happen countless times, personally witnessed it, where that can really, separate somebody.
Interesting. You mentioned it being different between a smaller market like Rochester, a big place like Boston or New York. How do you set the expectation? I'm sure you work with people that have moved back from one of those cities. Obviously, there's a different salary expectation, but there must be other cultural differences in there. So how do you set the stage for somebody moving back to the Rochester area?
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're right, we've seen it happen a lot of times over the last couple of years, people that maybe, even if they weren't physically in a new area, but maybe they took on a remote opportunity based out of a larger city that has, higher pay than the Rochester market, but they want to come back, either move back here or work with a company in their own community once again. That can be a difficult conversation because, we're all aware that Rochester market is different than a New York or a Boston or a San Francisco. So, I mean, in terms of setting the expectations, it's just being transparent and, letting people know what the market value is for their position. And also, in terms of the culture, it depends on the industry, but generally I'd say, it's a bit more of a slower pace here in comparison to the larger cities. So, I mean, that can be a positive too, right? It's, it could be your compensation isn't going to be what you're accustomed to in your role out of a bigger city, but cost of living is less. You're probably going to find some better work-life balance, but I mean, really, it's having those conversations up front, with folks, just to make sure that this is what they're looking for, right? That they're really ready to transition back to a Rochester company.
Yeah. A lot of reasons to move back to Rochester. Maybe salary is not one of them, but it seems like everybody wants to go the other way. They want to live in Rochester, get the remote job where they're based out in New York City, and then get to make a little bit more money. Is that right? It sounds like that's out of what you do. You're mostly placing people within the Rochester market.
Correct. Yeah.
Have any insight on that?
Yeah. We partner with all the companies here locally in our own community. That is the placements that we specialize in.
Got it. Is there opportunity? So the salary is one part of the negotiation if you're looking for a new opportunity, but there's other benefits that can also kind of sweeten the pot a little bit.
Sure.
What are some things that you feel are especially relevant in today's market when it comes to building a compensation package outside of just the salary?
Yeah, we see benefits outside of salary, right? Because that's not a benefit negotiated all the time. Honestly, the big ones for folks are PTO, obviously 401k match and things of that nature you can't do anything about. Sure. It's the company's plan, but even eligibility for benefits I've seen negotiated, right? You could have an antiquated policy of you're eligible for the benefits first of the month after 90 days, right? I've had someone recently negotiate to have that start immediately, right? So I would say in today's day and age, there's really, if you deliver it the right way and approach the negotiation the right way, there's really nothing you can't ask, because I guess you never know until you answer the question. But again, PTO, benefits eligibility, perhaps even tuition reimbursement, right? I mean, if you're someone who wants to further your education and you can explain how that's going to be advantageous for the company in the long run, those are ones that I've personally witnessed.
That's cool. PTO is a good topic. So there's a lot of companies, even larger employers in the Rochester market that I know have gone to this unlimited PTO model, which I've heard the good and the bad. On one side, yeah, you can get more time off. On the other side, it seems like it almost comes with a judgment when you take too much time off.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that model, and where is that headed?
Yeah, I've seen both sides of it. The stereotype, I think when you hear it is, oh, that's just a way for a company, not to have anything on their balance sheet as a liability, right? There's nothing to accrue, and you don't get to use as much as you'd like, right? But I know some places here locally that offer that as a benefit, and the employees love it, right? They are able to take 4 or 5 weeks off if that's what they want to do, and they have a strong team that supports them, their management supports it. I guess my answer to the question is it really depends on the company itself, and sometimes it can be the specific manager of the team within that department, right? From what I'm seeing, I do think more companies are going to that model, actually, which if you would have asked me 2 years ago, the stigma around it was that it's not a good thing, but I think I've seen it be more of a positive thing than a negative thing, and I do believe it's starting to become more popular, at least from my experience.
Yeah, it'll be something to see where it goes. It just seems like, I think a lot of people would rather have it be, if it's 3 weeks of vacation, just have it be 3 weeks, and then you take off without having to have that guilty feeling of not having it, but
and I think some companies are aware of kind of the stigma of it, so they're actually implementing a minimum time off So there is still an unlimited PTO policy, but they require you have to take at least 3 weeks off with that unlimited PTO. So they're putting a minimum.
It kind of solves it, gives you an idea.
Yeah.
Gives you a range of what's acceptable.
Yeah, I like seeing that because I think it's, HR, who's ever in charge, management of making these decisions is realizing that they're aware of the stigma around
Right.
it. They're trying to be proactive.
Kind of becomes, you can take off as much time as you want, but most people take 3 weeks, just so you know.
Exactly.
It gives you a standard.
Yeah, and I've seen that a handful of times in the last year come about, so that's a good trend. I'm
Okay.
all in favor of that.
Cool. So we'll change gears again. So let's say that you work with accountants mostly. So let's say I'm an accountant, I'm in a role, I don't love what I'm doing right now, I'm ready for a new challenge. When does it make sense to reach out to a recruiter like yourself? What is the point where I go from my online job search to actually hiring a professional to help me, and how does that work?
Yeah, I mean, my best answer is anytime it makes
Okay.
sense. I mean, that's
That's an easy plug.
Shameless plug. And the reason I say that is because, again, small town like Rochester, your network and who you know can play such a big part in securing a role. I've been doing this for like 5 years now, like I said, and who you know, it really isn't just an expression. I've seen it benefit folks a countless number of times. And for someone who might not know someone at a company, I mean, that's what a recruiter does, right? We are your referral. We are the person that has a relationship with the company, in some cases for almost 30 years,
Okay.
as long as we've been in business. But really, the benefit of connecting with a recruiter, even when you're not actively looking, is so you're prepared for the future, right? I mean, you're networking just to stay connected. So when that time comes, you have someone locally who knows you, who knows what you're looking for, knows what your career goals are, and is going to be looking at opportunities that can help you take that next. I mean, and another big factor is not every piece of information about a job is listed on a job description on that piece of paper, and that's a recruiter's job is to know that, right? Maybe this senior accountant opportunity, they're looking for someone to become the controller in the next year or two, and that's something you're not going to see on the job
Right.
description, but that a recruiter can tell you. And it's a completely free service too. There is no cost to the job seeker for that. It's all our revenue is generated from the client side. Oh man, I could go on about this. But when it makes sense to connect with a recruiter.
Okay, I'll interject there. So you mentioned
Yeah.
so we talked about the employer or employee side. So from the employer side, kind of the same question. When does it make sense to hire a recruiter to find somebody to do a job?
Yeah, I think a couple situations. If the hire is really critical, right? If this is a very important position, maybe someone who is going to be leading a team right away, or you want to grow into that level of leading a team, I think it makes sense to have someone who's a market expert, especially someone like myself who is focused on one specific discipline and not recruiting across a handful of disciplines, to really let you tap into the market and become aware of everything Rochester has to offer in terms of that specific talent.
Okay.
Right. And then also, I think the other side, when it could make sense, is if you don't have the capacity to do it yourself, right? I mean, some companies, their HR department is flat out, might have the capacity to post a job, interview candidates. We are essentially an outsourced HR department for some companies, right? And we're really an extension of your brand in the marketplace, and can vet out the right people and put the right people right in front of you. So really, the ultimate goal is just to have you talk to 3 or 4 people and who obviously have the technical skill set and pick who you
narrow
jive with the
down a
best,
whole lot
right?
more.
Yeah.
Do you work, so if a company has an internal recruiting department, and they have somebody, a lot of companies have somebody in that role, do you work side by side with that person, or is it they pick to work with you instead of working with their internal person?
Yeah, both situations, right? Larger companies that have their own internal talent acquisition departments, again, they run into capacity issues, or it can be a really difficult specific search, but we partner with internal talent acquisition teams all the time, and we really do work in a true partnership in those situations. Again, we kind of act as an extension of that internal talent acquisition team. But yeah, it's a very good relationship in those senses.
Very good. You mentioned a couple minutes before, I don't remember exactly how you phrased it, but the idea of, as a candidate, trying to find a role where there might be something that's not listed on the job description, or just having an opportunity to grow into it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people that I've talked to, that's one of the big hangups they have with where they're employed currently, is they feel like there's nowhere to go from there. They're in a position they're always going to be in. If they want to do something different, they do have to leave.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of get the sense as a candidate whether or not you're interviewing in a place that has room to grow? Because I think most of the time you're seeing an interview, they're going to kind of tell you what you want to hear, but
Sure.
what are some things you can ask to get to the bottom of that?
Yeah, again, I know we've said this, how interviewing is a two-way street, but I think everyone knows that, right? Everyone knows the worst thing you can do in an interview is to not be prepared with questions, but what are the right types of questions to ask, right? That can give you the information that you're looking for. So it's you might have been coached or taught that you should ask, what's the company culture like? I'm not a big fan of those types of questions. I think to ask something a bit more thought-provoking and specific, two things. It can help you get the information you need, and it can also, if the interviewers are having to put thought into their answers, I think that can really impress as a candidate, where you're making them be engaged and having to think critically. So for example, some of the questions I tell my candidates to ask could be, what does success in this role look like in 30 days? What does it look like in 90 days, a year? A good one that I personally think is effective is asking the interviewers, fast forward a year, what has this person that you hired done to elevate the team, right? So you can really find out what are their expectations, right? What would meet their expectations within a year? What could exceed their expectations within a year? So there's a handful of, deeper thought-provoking questions that you can ask that I think will, allow you to get the information you're looking for.
So what are some other questions that people can ask during the interview process to either stand out from the competition or just maybe let their resume shine through a little bit better?
Sure. If you're someone who is really looking for a place that you can be long-term, and plant some roots and not just have a job but a career, I think one of my favorite questions to the interviewers is, can you give me an example of someone who grew from this role within the company, right? That's something I don't think a lot of people think to ask.
Okay.
But just hearing it right from the horse's mouth, right? There have been people in this role before that have that have grown within the organization and are still there, or maybe moved on to something else. But I think that can give you a sense, is this kind of a spinning wheel of a position for this company, right? Do people just come in and take this role and leave and then they fill it, or are they really looking for someone who can blossom the organization? Yeah.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think it's almost like as the person interviewing, you want to go talk to that person or talk to other people within the company, which might not always be an opportunity that you're given.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of people think about that, right? And I definitely know folks who have done it, right? You can do some research and maybe find someone who was in that role and is no longer at the company and reach out to them and ask to have a conversation. And I know people are willing to do that, but that can't. Sometimes that's not possible. So asking a question like that during an interview, I think, is the next best thing if talking to someone who's in that role isn't an option.
Do you have any tips for people that, it seems like there's a lot you can do in an in-person interview, body language and all that to seem interested, but when you're on a Zoom screen, you have this little focused area. I think a lot of people really struggle with those types of interviews. Do you have any advice for people interviewing virtually?
Yeah, it's different, right? I think we've all, over the last couple of years, have had experiences of working through a computer screen or being in person, and it's definitely easier to make a human connection in person. My best advice for someone who might be doing an interview via computer, via Zoom or Teams or whatever, treat it like you're going in, right? Still dress up. I guess pants or shorts, that's up to you, but on top at least dress up. One thing that I've found helpful for folks is it can be really hard not to look at yourself.
On the Zoom screen, yeah.
Right? If you're in the
do
format, you find yourself looking at yourself when you're talking and not the person. Put a sticky note over where your face is going to be on the computer screen, so you're looking right at the person who's talking. You're not distracted, because I've heard this feedback from clients that someone they've interviewed via Zoom, right, and their eyes are just darting all over the screen, off the screen.
They have an AI tool now where you can make your eyes just stare at the camera, but it's kind of creepy because it's almost like too much eye contact. I don't know if you do that live during Zoom, but when you edit things,
if you're staring at someone, make sure you blink every, 10, 20 seconds.
I'll try that.
But yeah, we actually have a Word document we share with people about our best tips for virtual interviews, and that's one of them, right?
All right.
I know it sounds kind of unorthodox, but put a sticky note over the part of your screen where you're going to be. So
I think it'd be helpful. I think a lot of people already struggle in the interview process to come across as charismatic and have that energy, and when you put it on a Zoom meeting and maybe you're sitting at your kitchen table doing an interview with all kinds of distractions, it's really hard to convince somebody in a 20-minute window of time that you're worth a second interview.
Yeah, it's challenging. We recommend to our clients, the companies looking to hire talent, that if you can do an interview in person, that's where people have the best chance to really showcase who they are, because it can be hard to make an authentic connection through a screen.
Yeah,
absolutely get that.
Very cool. So I guess we've done some good interview type things. We've talked about just job seeking in general. Is there anything we're missing from this conversation?
I feel like I could talk forever about this, but off the top
I'll
of my
let you.
head,
Keep going.
I'm not sure. I know when it comes to financial planning, right? You have to, have the income that you need to get where you want to be. And I know financial planning is important, and you can pay yourself first. That should be one of the first things you do along with your mortgage, right? Is paying yourself and setting yourself up for the future. And, you know, with the cost of living going up, I think everyone's feeling that. There's, you know, I think one of the quickest ways to obviously help out yourself is to put yourself in a better position career-wise, right?
Definitely helps.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems we can solve if we have the money to do it. If you don't have the money to do it, it becomes a constant opportunity cost of, do you want to do X so you can pay for Y and Z, and it's hard for people. So
Yeah,
if we can create a little bit more cushion, that definitely helps. Before we end this, I'll throw one more question at you that you don't know is coming.
Right.
So we get the question all the time from people, or more recently, I guess, want to know tips for raising their kids with money or teaching their kids lessons about money.
Mm-hmm.
You're a father. Your kids are very young, so you
Yes.
haven't really gotten there yet. But any advice for people trying to teach their kids how to budget or how to have a healthy relationship with money?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my own childhood, and you know, I guess I became an accountant, so maybe
Okay.
I had some lessons that stuck with me about the importance of money and managing money, communicating that things aren't free, right? The things that your parents provide for you or your guardians provide for you, something they worked hard for, right? And to allow themselves to purchase it, you know, for you, and you know, you have to work for those things too, right? I think I remember mowing my parents' lawn for a dime, or
dime.
shoveling the driveway for a quarter. I'm sure with inflation, that's probably more like $1.
I don't think you're that old. That's probably at least $1 then.
So, you know, just communicating that things aren't free, right? And work goes into getting that money. Work goes into getting the things that we have, the food that we provide. I think that can go a long way.
Okay, love the answer.
Yeah.
Caught you off guard with that
No,
one?
I was not prepared.
Your kids are young, so you got some time to figure this
Yeah,
out. It'll
yes.
hold you accountable to that when the time comes.
Perfect.
All right, any questions for us?
Top of my head.
All right.
Yeah.
Should like prepare for that one.
Yeah.
But anyway, Ryan, thank you for being here.
Absolutely.
We've been the Roadmap to Retirement podcast, and we hope you'll keep listening.
Thank you.
Disclosure. Content here is for illustrative purposes and general information only. It is not legal, tax, or individualized financial advice. Nor is it a recommendation to buy, sell, or hold any specific security or engage in any specific trading strategy. Results will vary. Past performance is no indication of future results or success. Market conditions change continuously. This commentary reflects the personal opinions, viewpoints, and analyses of Alexander Neri. It does not necessarily represent those of RFG Advisory, their clients, or their employees. This commentary should not be regarded as a description of advisory services provided by Alexander Neri or RFG Advisory, or performance returns of any client. The views reflected in the commentary are subject to change at any time without notice. Advisory services offered by investment advisory representatives of RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. Alexander Neri and RFG Advisory are unaffiliated entities. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where RFG Advisory and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advisory services may be rendered by RFG Advisory unless a client agreement is in place.